Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where today's AI story is power, security, and who gets access. A single jailbreak bug turned into an international access cutoff, a diplomatic mess, and a reminder that frontier AI is already being treated like strategic infrastructure. The real question isn't just whether the model was dangerous, it's who gets to decide that, how fast, and under what legal authority. The clearest confirmed fact here is that the Commerce Department ordered Anthropic to shut down Mythos and Fable for foreign nationals, and it did so under threat of civil and criminal penalties. The stated trigger was a jailbreak vulnerability. On its face, that is not a trivial excuse. If a model can be pushed into behavior the vendor cannot reliably control, regulators are going to ask whether distribution itself creates a security risk. But the pressure test is whether the response matched the risk. A targeted pause while the bug is fixed is one thing. A broad foreign national cutoff, including allies, is a much bigger move with geopolitical meaning, whether Washington intended that or not. That's why the diplomatic scramble matters. Allies asked for access and got vague assurances, which suggests the US had operational control, but not a fully worked-out policy story for partners. The SK Telecom revocation is even more revealing. If the China-related rationale was tenuous, as analysts argued, then the action starts to look less like a precise safety measure and more like a flexible instrument of strategic control. There's also a process problem. Anthropic technical staff were in the room, but some senior government decision-makers were not. That usually means the machinery of state is improvising around a fast-moving technical issue. And the government's apparent near-term priority was fixing the jailbreak, not restoring broad consumer access. That tells you the center of gravity here is security containment. First, market normalcy. Second. The Nicholas Carlini research is the strongest support for the government's general concern, even if it doesn't automatically justify every specific ban. If Anthropic models could locate and exploit serious bugs in software, like Ghost CMS and parts of the Linux kernel, the risk is no longer abstract chatbot misuse. It's active vulnerability discovery with real downstream offensive potential. That matters because software exploits scale. A model that meaningfully accelerates finding critical bugs could compress the time between vulnerability and abuse. Still, capability evidence and policy design are different questions. A model being good at vulnerability discovery supports tighter oversight. It does not by itself prove that an ad hoc export-style shutdown applied unevenly is the best mechanism. The G7 optics were striking. AI CEOs were center stage, international coordination was the talking point, and at the same time, European officials were warning that the US effectively has a kill switch on frontier models. That complaint lands because infrastructure dependence changes diplomacy. If your companies, researchers, or telecom partners rely on US-controlled model access, then a technical policy dispute can become a sovereignty dispute overnight. Legal scholars also flagged something important. Last-minute licensing orders may be constitutionally vulnerable, and they definitely create business uncertainty. Markets can price strict rules. What they struggle with is unpredictable rules. If access can disappear through improvised executive action, companies start designing around US dependence. And that's where the second-order effect cuts against American leverage. Overuse of restrictions can push customers toward Chinese or other open alternatives, which may reduce US influence over standards, safety norms, and information flows. Europe's answer is hardware. The Commission's €20 billion gigafactory plan is an attempt to build actual AI capacity instead of just talking about regulation and values. But the scale problem is brutal. 5 facilities and around 100,000 GPUs sounds large in isolation. Against US hyperscalers spending roughly 3 times more per month on AI data centers, it looks more like partial catch-up than true independence. So the plan still matters, but mostly as strategic positioning. It can improve bargaining power and local capability without fully closing the sovereignty gap. This is where the story gets awkward for export controls. Chinese and other open models are improving fast and in some cases getting dramatically cheaper. GLM 5.2 reportedly tops reasoning leaderboards and costs about 1/10 per token versus Fable 5. Kimi 2.7 shows a sizable coding gain. Smaller releases like Vive Thinker are getting attention because they run on modest hardware. Even if you discount benchmark hype, the direction is hard to ignore. Enterprises and cloud platforms are testing alternatives because cost is not a side issue anymore, it's product strategy. Microsoft reportedly evaluating fine-tuned DeepSeek and DeepSeek variants for Copilot fits that pattern exactly. Big platforms don't need the single best model at any price. They need acceptable quality at sustainable economics. And increasingly, they don't need one model at all. Compound systems and routing layers are beating single frontier models on hard tasks by sending work to specialized models and then synthesizing the result. OpenRouter's Fusion API and Harvey's hybrid setup are good examples. The claim isn't magic, it's division of labor. One model reasons, another checks, another writes, and token use drops. That means the moat may be shifting. Frontier capability still matters, but orchestration, token efficiency, and cost control may matter just as much in practice. The KPMG and UT Austin study helps cut through a lot of executive fog across 1.4 million workplace interactions. The highest impact users treated AI like a reasoning collaborator, not just a summary machine. That sounds obvious, but it's not how many deployments are sold. A lot of enterprise AI is still framed as instant productivity through extraction and automation. The more grounded finding is that prompting as an iterative problem-solving process appears teachable, and only about 12% of companies are getting measurable business value today. So there are two readings. One is underperformance and hype. The other is that organizational practice, not model quality alone, is still the bottleneck. Both can be true. OpenAI's finances need one correction right away. The huge 2025 loss headline was dominated by a $30 billion non-cash accounting charge tied to its conversion. Excluding that, the operating loss was still large at about $8 billion, but the company also had roughly $73 billion in cash and appears profitable on inference revenue versus cost of revenue. So the supported conclusion is not that OpenAI is collapsing, it's that the company is expensive, still scaling, and financially unusual enough that headline losses can mislead. On product, sunsetting the pulse briefing and folding it into scheduled tasks for paid tiers hints at a familiar trade-off. Broad consumer friendliness versus tools that better support serious workflows and developers. Then there's talent. Noam Shazir moving to OpenAI after Google's elaborate character AI-related deal is one of those personnel stories that matters because frontier model roadmaps are still unusually person-dependent. If insiders are right that this complicates Gemini plans, it reinforces a broader truth. In AI, org charts can move markets almost as much as product launches. The SpaceX piece looks almost surreal on first read. A massive valuation, cloud revenue supposedly doing most of the work, supercomputing facilities being repurposed for AI, and a reported Cursor acquisition around $60 billion. If those figures hold, the strategic logic is straightforward. Own compute, own distribution, acquire a fast-growing coding product, and use lower-cost models as a wedge into the frontier race. But this is also the section where listeners should be most careful about narrative inflation. High growth, benchmark claims, and promised compute multipliers are not the same thing as durable state-of-the-art performance. The important takeaway is less whether SpaceX instantly becomes an AI leader, and more that the boundary between cloud, model lab, and application company is collapsing fast. The through line today is simple. AI power is no longer just about the smartest model. It's about who controls access, compute, routing, and the legal rules around all of it. This has been Podkey Slopcast. Thanks for listening. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.